The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and 2T Fitness.
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the 2010 edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I'm from the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, of course, my co-host, your friend, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hit me, Tom.
Have you heard the one about the marathon runner and the chicken?
Very nice.
Shida has some lines in this movie.
Shider's fucking great.
I was
but not yet,
prepared
Tom.
for that. I really wasn't.
How could you not be prepared?
Well, because my, I was thinking about 2001: A Space Odyssey.
That was your mistake.
Yeah, I that wins the visual game hands down. This movie wins the dialogue.
Very good, then. Well, Tom, the only reason we are doing 2010, the year we make contact, is because we have a special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, we are being joined for this movie by Pete the Retailer. You might know him from Star Wars Minute. Hello, Pete.
Hello. I feel pressured now that this is the only reason why you're doing this. I'm like, uh-oh.
Oh, no.
I feel like I forced you guys into something.
Yeah, but I was so happily and surprised by... Because I believe, Tom, you said, what movie would you like to do, right?
Yeah.
And Pete, you came back with 2010, and I'll speak for Tom. I was excited. The second I heard that, I was so excited. What made you, what made you want to do this movie?
It's 2001 is what I often say is my favorite movie, my favorite film, let's say, of all time. Star Wars, obviously, the amount of time that I've spent talking about it, and it's more of a cultural phenomenon that I'm engaged with. And I do love, the original movie Star Wars very much. But I will often just say for maybe it's my little tiny internal film snob saying like, well, 2001 is obviously a superior film. It's like, so I will often say that that's my favorite film. But so to have a completely different landscape, whereas as I'm well aware, Star Wars is sequeled out the wazoo at this point, and so to have this weird kind of one-off follow-up sequel to 2001, which is just alternate reality of like almost what could have been. If things were reversed, maybe I'd be sitting here and be like, did you know they made a sequel to Star Wars? And we're talking about it right now. But I've always had a certain, I don't know, it's a weird fondness and also at the same time distaste for this movie. But but it's always, I've definitely... It's warm to me. I've got good feelings about it overall, even though I know that there's a lot of things that are just like, really?
That's funny you say that because I've always fucking loved this movie. I just do. I connected with this movie as a kid.
Well, sure. Yeah. As a kid, very much so. And then I again, that's that stupid adult brain popped in at some point in my 20s where I had to be like, oh no, I'm cool and I know things, and therefore this movie is bad. And it fought that initial love a little bit, but I've come back around, in which I really do love this movie, but also I understand that there's a lot of things that it's not, you have to kind of, as I'm sure we'll get into, you really have to kind of disconnect it from 2001.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you said that your adult brain popped in, and my first thought was, not me.
Well, just to complete this fascinating triptych of opinions, well, I don't know if mine is as fascinating, but I mean, we've talked on this podcast before, especially with regards to Sylvester Stallone. I'm a grown man baby. Like I saw too many art movies as a young man, and as I'm growing older, I'm seeing the things that most people see and appreciate as teenagers, and enjoying them immensely. And I'd never seen this movie before.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And
that was one of my questions for you, actually.
Never seen it before.
Pete, just so you know, we're dealing with a man who would go and see another Stakeout in the theater, having never seen Stakeout at all.
And still have not seen Stakeout. Yeah.
Wow.
Despite the best intentions of Amazon Prime Video to make me. Yeah. So this just felt like it had been missing from my life, quite frankly. I mean, it's sort of one of 2 or 3 movies we've done on this podcast, with like Prisoner of Azkaban and the Final Destination series, where I feel like I was really missing out. And for the interest of the podcasts as well, I thought, well, finally, here's a good example of a movie that gets the balance between original and sequel. How far do you move away from the original and go in your own direction, and how far do you stay latched? How much do you stay latched onto the original? I mean, that's literally happening in this movie. They latch themselves onto the original movie in a physical sense,
right?
Which was a great visual for me. I thought, yeah, that's what sequels are doing.
But to Pete's point, what's interesting to me about this movie is that, yeah, the movie, I mean, it's an 80s movie, first of all. And yeah, the movie might have problems. But to me, I think the easiest way to not call this movie a good movie is only in its relation to 2001.
Yeah.
If you separate it from 2001, to me, it's very hard to call it a bad movie.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever call it a bad movie, and not even in my, my elitist
right.
heyday. I would never be like, oh, that's terrible. I was just like, yeah, it's definitely, it's a lot more a product of its time,
yes.
Certainly. It's very much
and a product of its director, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting kind of like, I wouldn't have. Like, coming back to it for this, I'm happy we got to address it, because I learned a whole bunch of new things about it that have increased my appreciation. I didn't realize how much of a kind of auteur project this was. I just assumed it was it's a Hollywood cash grab, that kind of a thing, and it's just filmed by committee. But no,
yeah,
right. It's Chaim's at the wazoo, and like he even shot it himself. Like it's like everything. Very much his movie, although I think like I really want it to be a little bit more his movie, because I feel like the times where it falters is when it kind of asks to be compared to 2001. That's the problem. It's comparing like it's not as drastic. I don't think the first Alien movie is on it's a great movie. I love it. I don't necessarily think it's on an artistic par with 2001 per se. It's great, but then the choice to go, for Aliens, to make it is far enough away from Alien that you're not always making that comparison. And
it's apt,
this,
though.
I think, for the most part. Yeah, for the most part, you're, the more that it deals with the, like, the kind of glasnost, Russian and American crews, and they're exploring, figuring out what happened to the Discovery is great. And then once you do things like, there's a few exceptions, but like most of the problems come from like, oh, I'm literally walking into a set that we had to recreate because Kubrick smashed them all so that we wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
There was,
but we're doing this and we're walking into this same set, and then it's like, oh yeah, but now it's. I get it. You're right. It's reminding me of this other movie.
I was half expecting to see Kubrick there with his camera necklace in some of the shots. I thought that would be a great touch. maybe they could update Hal for the 80s with a mullet and jean shorts and medallions.
Right.
Well, for those that don't know, we've been talking a while, but we are talking about 2010, the year we make contact, the 1984 movie directed by Peter Hyams, who you know even if you don't know. He's done movies like Outland, which this movie feels a lot like, The Star Chamber, a movie I love, Running Scared. That's one of my all-time kid favorite movies. The Presidio, Narrow Margin,
Presidio.
Time Cop, yeah, Sudden Death, and The Relic.
Didn't he also do Stay Tuned?
I think
He may have. Did he write Stay Tuned, or am I?
Oh, I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
I think you might be right. This movie had a budget of $28 million.
Shows
an
where
opening
my
weekend,
level's at, doesn't it? Stay tuned.
an opening weekend of $7.3 million in the USA and the world, $40.4 million. So, you know,
Wow.
not a hit, but you know, made money. It's a modest hit.
Yeah. He did direct and
Right.
DP.
Okay.
Stay tuned. He didn't write it, but he was the director and the cinematographer.
Oh, I thought. Okay, yeah.
So yes, good call.
Nice.
Stay tuned. I saw that in the theater.
Me too. Yes.
Nice.
I that's another formative. We've just done the Naked Gun series, Pete, and so we're going through a lot of, not with this movie, but a lot of formative cinematic memories for me, and Highlander 2, which is a formative cinematic memory for Mike.
I'll say.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen any of the Highlanders in the theaters, but the Naked Gun, I definitely like. The first one, it was more of a buzz movie that then like that. But then when the second one came out, I definitely saw that, and I was like, oh, all in. And then when the third one came out, it was, I believe it might have been my freshman year of college, or there's something where I was more independent and out and about, and I went to go see it opening weekend. And I was like, yeah, that was all right. And then somehow, like, a group of friends were going to see it again the next night and dragged me along. And seeing it that rapidly in succession, like, it could just give me a horrible taste in my mouth. And I was like, let me walk away from this for a long time.
Going back to it after, going back to in 2021, talk about bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah, that's not an easy watch. Anything involving O.J. Simpson, you go, Jesus, fuck.
Well, yeah.
How do we all feel about the title, the subtitle?
I think this is interesting because is that the full title? It's not in the credits. It's not at the beginning of this movie or at the end of the movie. The movie's just labeled as 2010, but everywhere else you see it, it's 2010, the year we make contact. Based on the book, of course.
Huh.
Right. Now,
and there are four
book
books in the series, if memory recalls. There's 2061 and 3001 as well.
Oh, right. He wrote a fourth one.
Yeah.
The book is just called Odyssey 2,
Yeah.
right? It's not. It doesn't have any kind of. It's like 2010 Odyssey 2.
Right. I think that's right.
Well, the subtitle's interesting for the reason Mike just laid out. Also, just the present and past tense problems that watching this in 2021 has, because
right.
that was the year. Should we change that to the year we made contact? Does anyone really make contact in this movie? So there's a lot of levels on which this title is problematic.
Yeah, is working and not working.
We need a future. Yeah, we need a future imperfect.
That's right.
Or something.
Yeah.
The year we will have made contact.
Right.
When you've gone that far and you've done the colon, why stop there? As we found in previous episodes.
Yeah, of course. Well, would either one of you be surprised to find out, I don't know if you knew this, but this movie garnered 5 Oscar nominations as opposed to the first movie, which only had 4? I find that rather incredible.
It's they're mostly technical.
Yeah, they're all sort of the suspects you think they would be: art direction, costume, sound, effects, makeup.
Yeah, those the genre slums of the Oscars,
Right.
which most of the stuff I'm more interested in lives there. So it's yeah. I also that is mildly surprising. I forget what was the original nominated for. I feel like
I'd have to look it up. I mean, best director. I don't know that it was best writing, but
yeah. I did know that this got this won the Hugo Award that year, and I was like, well, what was it up against? I can't remember, and I looked it up. It won the Hugo for like best dramatic presentation. It beat Dune, which
oh wow,
that's I understand that, even though my heart might not agree. I understand it. Star Trek 3.
Okay, yeah.
The Search for Spock, Last Starfighter, and Ghostbusters, which is interesting. That it's like I can understand a sci-fi crowd saying like Ghostbusters. No, it's not really sci-fi, but like I don't know. There's certain.
Is that just the Arthur C. Clarke of it all? Do you think?
I think it could be. It's the names behind it and the concept behind it, and like we said, as a purely kind of again looking at it on its own, I think I think Dune and Star Trek 3, as much as I love them, aren't as good of a movie as this is. You can make arguments for Last Starfighter and Ghostbusters, but I feel like I can see why a group of sci-fi writers in 1985, 84, 85 would vote that way.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense.
I really like the screenplay of this movie.
I think this movie. Well, yes. I mean, I like the screenplay, and one thing that struck me, because by the way, I watched this twice in like 2 days.
Oh, good.
And one thing that struck me was, if you had asked me how long this movie was after I was finished watching it, I would have said 90 minutes, but it's just under 2.
Yeah.
I think this movie is amazingly paced.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
it's efficient.
And
it does not at all feel long.
I had a brief moment near the beginning where I think because I was just settling down to do stuff. My wife had just put the kids to bed and came back in. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm just starting this. Do you want to, I can kind of bring you up to speed. I haven't done that much. And then having that little kind of pause in there, then getting back into, the swing of things, I started to, the kind of melodrama of when he announces to his wife, hey, I'm going on the mission, and she's smashing the plates and all this other stuff. As soon as that gets too much to me, it's not all. I love the shot of him jogging with his son going down the hill.
I love that shot
that's
too.
A very it's like weirdly it's like what AI should have been, because it's like part Kubrick and part Spielberg.
That's another part of this movie I really like, is the vision of the future. It doesn't go too far into the future like other future movies do. It feels more,
Yeah, well, it's very
natural.
Kind of, Arthur C. Clarke, where he's just extrapolating on things that we have to a certain extent. But then, like, a little bit of that melodrama started to get. I'm like, all right, we don't need another scene of them talking. And then, like, literally in the middle of me thinking that, it's like, bang, space. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
Right, yeah.
Great. Thanks. Up there, whoever heard me in the projection booth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, but there are plenty of things that's in fact we haven't really talked yet about, because that front scene between Schneider and Dana Elker.
Oh my God, I have so many things to say about that.
Fucking love it. Well, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I must have been in an alliterative mood, because I wrote shouting over satellites with Scheider in shorts and shades. Well, I mean, this comes after a recap montage of the first movie, which is normally something I'm principally against. But believe it or not, I actually really liked what they did there, because it's science fiction, so you just turn the first movie into a database, and it kind of works fantastic.
Well, and not just that, but they come up with a narrative reason. The Russian just finished reading that report.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it all feels plausible and integrated, and then and I just love the fact that, you know, I think one of the things we could probably talk about is, like, you know, is this movie for the people who didn't understand 2001? Because
Right.
there must have been a sigh of relief that went over the you know, the people in the audience who found 2001 too pretentious, or didn't get it, or you know, were worried they were missing something, when, you know, the information at the end of every bit of detail is unknown.
Right, yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
it must have been like, oh great, I just, like, I didn't miss something. This movie really didn't answer any questions.
Well, I think 2001's a little divisive in that way. I'm with you, Pete. I love 2001.
Me too.
But I know that there are people in the world who just think, you know, get off your high horse and just tell me, you know, it's too impressionistic, I think, for some people. It's such a visual movie. Yeah, that movie's 2.5 hours long, and there's only 40 minutes of dialogue, I think. So for some people, I think that's maddening, where they want to be led down a narrative that they don't get,
But
especially by the end. And this movie is just all narrative. So they,
well,
to your point, Tom,
well,
they're just, you know, pigs in shit for this movie.
But it does, and then, you know, the satellite scene does exposition extraordinarily well. You know, to have them shouting the exposition at each other, with one person up in a satellite and the other one down on the ground, and the fact that it's very high stakes. You know, at the end of the scene, I made a note saying, did they just end the Cold War in that one scene?
Right.
And it's very funny, and it's full of great character notes. You know, there's a certain quirkiness and absurdity to the fact that they're having this secret meeting. Yeah, it reminded me of the Larry Sanders show. You know, you going to have any more secret meetings today, Mr. Sanders? It's like they're doing it, screaming at each other. And the actors are fantastic. I just thought, well, this is how all exposition scenes should be. Like, something interesting to look at, good dialogue, and there's high stakes.
I thought you meant they should all be in, you know, at a satellite.
I'd be fine with that. Maybe the rest of the mainstream cinema audience wouldn't. I'd be fine with that. I also love the fact that it's such an 80s projection of what a chancellor of a university looks like. In shorts and the shades.
Looks like Magnum PI.
Right.
Sans mustache.
You know, the movies and franchises this make me think of, interestingly, you know, ones we've already mentioned, Aliens, also, you know, Star Trek The Next Generation, in the sense of well, I suppose it's late 80s, 90s, but projecting that into the future. Like, when I saw Roy Scheider in Shorts and Shades, I thought, we're really, you know, we're just like, we're extrapolating from where we are now in style as well as technology.
Right.
Interesting.
It's great. And we're still fighting the Cold War, which I thought was fascinating.
Right. Yeah, of all the things to not survive, to not be an accurate prediction, it's good that was one of them. It's like, you know,
right.
It's like, you know, Pan Am, great, but like the
right,
War,
exactly, because this movie calls some shots, and so many of them get wrong. But I don't know if you noticed that they called the Beijing Olympics in 2008. There's a poster on his kid's wall that says Beijing 2008.
And it's a good, you know, weird swings to take. That's a good, you know. And I guess at the time that would be unusual for being, you know.
Yeah.
In the 80s, we weren't, you know, we weren't as much of we didn't interact with China as much as we did maybe on a bigger level. But I feel like now kind of the world stage has a lot more China in it than it did in 1984, let's say.
Right.
So for it to be not that the Olympics only goes to major players in the world, but but it's a good call.
Yeah, I thought I had some of those feelings about when they send the probe down, how much it looks like a modern day drone. thinking, is that a chicken and egg situation? I mean, we know from Star Wars and Star Trek that people in science and technology do look to precedents set by certain movies and certain TV shows. So I was kind of wondering. And I love that they almost got it right with the laptop on the beach. Like, because at this point you couldn't foresee the smartphone trend. But they got the basic idea that you would have this mobile everything machine that you would take with you, even to like places like the beach. They just couldn't see it as a phone.
Yeah. Right.
But it was so close. He's like taking this little IBM printer almost to the beach. It's great.
All right, well, we're off to a great start. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll dive deeper into 2010. Sound good, gentlemen?
Certainly does. Let's
All
make
right.
contact.
Right after this.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, the three of us, Tom, Pete, and I, we're here talking about 2010, the year we make contact, directed by Peter Hyams. All right, gentlemen. So narratively, we just got done with our satellite talk. And as you described, Pete, now, we have some sort of on-Earth stuff to kind of take care of, and then we're in space.
If before not to clunk up the show, but to step back into the satellite stuff for a second, that's the most kind of. I feel like that's for good and bad. That's immediately letting you know that this isn't Kubrick, because it's like the raw materials. It could very well be a very Kubrick kind of shot, like that. What he would have done with that row of satellites and all this other stuff, and then,
right.
But instead, you have this very completely different style of a lot of close up on them as they're talking, and you're not getting this kind of vista of this long row of satellites. You're just getting, people are kind of obscured by the railings half the day. It's just like, oh, this is different. This is not, this is a different art here that I'm looking at. Okay. Like it's a good kind of dip into transition.
Well, did either one of you ever think about that while you were watching this movie? Did you think, I wonder what Kubrick would have done with this?
All the time.
Right?
All the time.
Yeah.
But it was always, I was always impressed, I think, that they were able to, that the direction was able, and the cinematography was always able to define itself as, in its own way, just as spectacular, but just, a different directorial take on that. Like, everything, like, the shots feel more prosaic, but, I mean, like, that... The shots of the shots of the satellite, the shots of the White House, the those long, deep, wide takes,
right,
and compositions, are very impressive. They just, there's something about this movie. It just feels a little more prosaic, like factual, for want of a better word. That
Right.
it's boiling it down to the bones of filmmaking in some ways, which partly I think is about distinguishing from Kubrick's style. I noticed later on that there's a sort of half-hearted attempt at a sort of a jump cut when you go into space. It's like a hard cut that doesn't match.
Right.
And I thought that was a nice moment of like, we're not gonna do the jump cut, but we're gonna do the kind of, we're gonna boil it down to essence of it. It's a hard cut. It's fine.
Right.
It'll do.
There's no slow motion bone up in the air, but we are hard cutting to space.
Right.
Yeah. So, I thought about that a lot, but I was always happy that it was defining itself within its own style.
Well, and as I understand it, because I know that the director, Peter Hyams, one of the first things he did was say, like, "Are you okay with this, Stanley? Like,
Right, yeah.
do you ever want to do it?" And he said, "No, I don't want anything to do with like a sequel. Do your movie and do whatever you want." Which must have
Right.
been a nice message to get back too,
Well, yeah, I think that's the important bit is, make your own movie, which
Right.
I think is
Which he absolutely did.
Yeah, largely he did. I think that, again, like the times, I think when it spends too much time in the shadow of 2001 is when the times where it falters a little bit. And I think that's, absolutely when it succeeds is when he was doing that. And I like that. And I like the where I want to find I'm sure that might be an accurate story, and I've read that, and I want to find the source on that it's not just, Peter Hyams being like, yeah, I talked to him, he said go make your own movie, and it's like, in retro, like, really? Because it literally, he had us, like, burn the house down so nobody would do this, like.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, I guess, well, maybe it's just he didn't want somebody making, wallowing in the same stuff, and maybe when, that was part of it, all right, go make your own movie. Like,
He probably just had to hear the name and think, I'm safe, go ahead, do your own, whatever you want.
and being like, I think the things would be like, don't try to recreate exactly what I did. And so that again, that's not to harp on it, but it's like, all right, I think maybe take that into heart more, and don't it's hard with you when you're trying to accurately kind of, adapt the source material for film too, because that's all, Arthur C. Clarke is also, you're basing it on his story, and he's just as much a collaborator in at least the narrative.
Yeah, he's actually feeding pigeons in front of the White House scene.
And I think, the way that,
and he and Kubrick are actually on the cover of Time magazine as like the president and the premier.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I think it defines itself in the early part of the film stylistically against 2001, but also I thought it was trying to generically define itself as something other than science fiction. Like it sort of starts as a kind of Cold War espionage thriller almost, and with weird touches of horror, like the distorted Dave Bowman line,
right,
which ties the movie together. When that came in, I was like, whoa, what is this movie? What has Dave turned into? And to have that spy narrative, Cold War, run through until they get into space, I thought it was doing a lot of very interesting things, and then it sort of the voiceover stuff has a noirish feel as well. So I think it's playing with a lot more generically. Yeah. Is the sense I got.
Here's a question for both of you. Do you think this movie works better for people of a certain age, meaning us, because we lived through the Cold War? I mean, if you were younger and have no kind of frame of reference for that or the fear of that, does this movie not work as well?
Probably I mean, it definitely works better, I think, from having lived
Right.
through it. I don't know if you can accurately represent the, does it seem silly, the level of pettiness and lack of communication between the two parties, the two countries, the two governments, and how much that would affect something like that, where it's like this thing that makes the most sense and would benefit humanity, doing this, joining forces to uncover, one of the greatest mysteries that we've come across.
Right.
Like, oh no, but we can't because there's a boat not where it's supposed to be. In the Caribbean somewhere. It's like what? Like,
Right.
you're gonna let like a stupid disagreement kind of interfere with this, and that I'm not saying we're free and clear of that now, but like that was certainly like the height of it. Certainly is hard to capture, unless you were there, and maybe it might make it, I don't know. Is it more enjoyable if you don't have that baggage of walking in with it? And you can just, appreciate it as, part of the science fiction, essentially, that there's like, oh yeah,
right.
there are these two warring empires, it's like, it's almost like,
I thought I liked, in a purely dramatic sense, how it kept the stakes in space high.
Yes,
and
right.
The kind of nucleus of a really interesting science fiction idea of, well, I mean, it's been done in other places like the Last Ship and to an extent, Silent Running, but basically the shit's going down on Earth and we're stuck in space. What do we do?
right.
And we're right in the middle of this because, we have representatives of the two nations that are about to blow up the Earth on one ship. So I liked the stakes and, what that did story-wise. But, it has, certainly now it has the danger of seeming almost quaint.
Right.
To a modern day audience who is dealing with as Pete was saying, it's something that, similar global, similar problems with global war and global terror that are just as dangerous, but reframed as basically like two countries that couldn't get along. It does seem kind of weirdly antiquated in some ways. Yeah. But I guess that's a problem you can't get around in science fiction because there is so much of like projecting your historical context into whatever future you're imagining.
Right.
That you're always that's why Next Generation you have a carpeted spaceship because
right. Yeah.
because why wouldn't you in that 1987 exactly why wouldn't the future look like this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the, we're in space now. I guess one of the things I want to talk to both of you about, give it to me at least. This movie has a stellar cast.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it.
Right?
There's a handful of things that I since the last time I watched it, I was surprised to rediscover, or, things that meant more to me now. And I was like, oh, like, first and foremost, probably Helen Mirren. I was like, Helen Mirren?
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
And I think her first American movie role.
Yeah, right?
I'm pretty sure that's right.
Well, I didn't think there was much that could dispel the beauty of Helen Mirren, but that haircut comes close.
I'll give you that.
But I love she's like this proto Bridget Nielsen from Rocky IV kind of vibe about her. It's great, and some of my favorite scenes are between her and Scheider. I think I would teach the Kentucky bourbon scene in film school as to how to do dialogue between cultures that don't understand each other.
Right.
It's gorgeous stuff.
Yeah.
And great things of potentially distasteful things like having a human version of Hal which seems like a bad sequel idea. It's like, what if we made Hal a human? What if we saw the guy who invented Hal?
Right.
And but the fact that it's Bob Balaban takes the bad taste out of your mouth, because you're like,
Completely,
yeah,
right?
that's kind of what it would be. And just the way that his character, the arc his character has through the movie, fascinated me. The idea of, when you first see him go into space, you think, this guy is getting, he's getting an early rap time when he's going to die
Right.
on his first mission.
Right.
And then for him to sort of come out on top as the most sophisticated astronaut in the American team was lovely to behold for me.
Well, I think it says something to the strength of the actors, specifically him, that he can bring such emotional weight to that last scene. I mean, that's skipping ahead a bit, but
Right.
I mean, he's bringing it as he's talking to nobody.
And
I like the way that he and Lithgow are sort of introduced as, why would you bring these guys into space?
Right.
Like, it seems like the worst possible idea, and the fact that turns out to be only true for one of them, I think is really great character writing. It's like, one of them will grow into something, but let's be real, not both of them are not gonna end up being Neil Armstrong here.
Right.
One of them has the capacity for this, the other is just gonna be a bad choice. He's the guy who knows the thing, so he gets to go to the ship. Let's just leave it at that.
well, and he does, by bringing kind of an element of, there's a certain, I don't want to say, creepiness, but you have a level of, like he's very passionate about, and you see him kind of only interacting with computers at first, and
Yeah.
And essentially it's painting it in this way that it's like, oh, he's where his allegiances are, essentially, that he's again, like you said, a human Hal, like he's dedicated to this kind of,
he feels like AI himself.
yeah. And so then that kind of sets up, like, this whole time that you have a little bit of this, like, oh, is he going to betray everybody, or is this going to be like a...
Yeah.
And I'm always really relieved when a trope like that doesn't manifest.
Yes.
I'm not saying it can't be well done. A lot of times it is well done, but it's often like getting this, like, I see where this is going. And it's like, oh no, it wasn't. Okay. Like, I like that. I'm glad that wasn't, that was played with a little bit and then kind of diffused, and he ends up kind of doing, not out of his character, within the established, scope of his character, also ends up essentially saving everybody and kind of,
by standing on his principles and keeping his own morality, his own moral compass.
Yeah. And like, there are no real villains in this movie other than bureaucracy, which is great. Like, I love that it's not, it was like, oh, we don't trust each other, and then we're going to, and then somebody betrays the trust. It's just like, oh no, we're working through this, and it's a very almost like a Star Trek, like a Roddenberry-esque kind of
yeah, right.
message.
But I guess starting with conflict, and then that conflict being resolved, which is the trick that Roddenberry never really learned before his passing, at least dramatically. And I really appreciated that too. Just the for me, 2001 has a great deal of humanity, but it's historical, it's allegorical, it's scientific, and with this movie, the humanity is all in the characters.
Yeah.
And how they develop and how they grow, how they learn to relate to each other. I think it's beautifully done. I find it very moving.
I think I want to piggyback on that, because I spoke when we first started about how much I loved this movie when I was a kid, and it was kind of a trip to watch it again. It's been so long since I've seen it, and I realized, I don't know, all the things that I took away from this movie as a kid, whether it was big or small, like in small increments or big increments, when they're about to do the air braking, and the Russian woman comes into his thing, and they're holding each other, and he buckles her up, and then she kisses him on the cheek, and the look on his face after that, to me, is like, I've remembered that look as a moment of acting my whole life.
Yeah.
And I just remember that speaking to me as a kid about platonic relationships.
Yes. It's so interesting you brought that up, Mike, because it made me think that in the same way that Doctor Strangelove is a comedic version of Failsafe, that this is kind of like the straight version of Moonraker. It's like all the same kind of beats.
43 minutes, everyone.
Done without, sexual molestation.
Right.
Yeah.
and then double sexual molestation and double entendres taken out of it. I loved, we get the, I think he's attempting re-entry, sir, but there's no actual sex going on just there, just as you say, platonic friendship.
Which is another relief. Again, that like,
exactly, right.
This isn't a trope that's going to unfold, that they're going to have this thing and it's not going to, I mean, maybe, I haven't read I've read the book for 2001. I haven't read 2010. Maybe that develops more. Maybe there is a little subplot of him being, them having a possible romantic encounter. But I love that that's just, at least on, within what's on screen. It's just like, okay, well, there's some crazy stuff going on, and they need comfort.
And I'm scared.
They're just gonna be, there's that level of intimacy purely in, crisis bonding, and then it's over. Like, okay, like, now we're going to go about our business. And that's, I'm glad that it didn't unfold into stuff, especially with the, there's the, both somehow at once, both subtle and heavy-handed, that as that's happening, the family portrait slams against the wall, behind him.
Yeah.
And it's like, uh-oh.
And it's not to say there aren't other 80s things going on, but they also reference it, because he like, in reality, Scheider is a good 25 years older than his wife in this movie, in reality. But he also mentions that in this movie when he's describing her in the Kentucky scene, Tom. They're asking each other about their families with him and Helen Mirren, and he says she's young and smart, and so there's a reference to that, and for some reason it felt motivated.
Yeah.
Narratively.
And you kind of expect something to develop with him and Helen Mirren, and
something does, but it's like respect and friendship.
It's like cross-cultural, understanding, but it's a smart enough screenplay that it can see that there's an opportunity to take the wrong road, and it kind of wants the viewer to know that it's not going there.
Right.
That's like a hard screenplay trick to pull off, but I think that's kind of what the family. I mean, maybe that was a directorial choice, but the family portrait and there's a moment with Helen Mirren after that as well, which makes me think, is he just going to treat space as Vegas and say, well, it didn't count, zero gravity doesn't count,
Happened in space.
Yeah, but as Pete said, it's a relief that we don't go down those roads, but they're very clearly marked rabbit holes. In the movie itself, it just kind of decides that the movie's about something else, for the better, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Speaking of I've totally have no clue what the character's name is, but that the other Russian, the other cosmonaut who
Max?
No, the woman who hops in pod with him.
Yeah.
The actress, she's got a fascinating background that I didn't even realize. I was just like, oh, what's her deal? And I looked her up, and she was, mostly known as a musician. She's passed away now, but she was like, she was basically in the scene, in the crew that eventually kind of became the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and was
whoa.
It's a really odd, interesting, and she had a successful career for a while as a musician and stuff, and then was not expecting that. And I was like, what's her deal? Why wasn't she in more stuff? Oh, she went and did other things and was successful at that. But
and I only found out retrospectively that Sal,
Candice Bergen
was Candice Bergen.
Yeah, I literally only upon looking at the Wikipedia for this to do this episode, I was like, oh, no way.
Yeah, I discovered that for this viewing as well.
And we didn't really mention Sal, and to be fair, it doesn't really go anywhere. But classic sequel inversion there.
Oh, yeah.
For Sal.
Right.
That's one of the moments where I'm glad. I'm glad we have it in the movie. I like the moment, but
we started developing,
switch.
Pete, our own language for movies. That's what we call an imbas. It must be a sequel.
Yeah, it must be a sequel because we have a number of them.
Right.
This movie has a number of them.
Yeah.
The sequel inversion and the recap montage.
Right.
Not to mention the mini, the obligatory mini montage of Roy Scheider training for space.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Just to remind you that you're watching an 80s movie in case you forgot.
Exactly. Yeah. A little bit of 80s has to seep in. We need a training montage there.
But again, a really low-key montage.
But exactly.
That fits the tone of the movie. I think this movie plays to lots of cliches, but never falls victim to them. I love it.
And it makes sense that they're like, all right, well, here's, essentially a scientist who then was a teacher, but he's going to go into space, so he's going to need to spend some time getting into shape because it's, physically demanding. So it's like, all right, well, that makes sense.
And Mike and I have covered the Jaws series on the show, and I don't know. I was probably more than most people because it's we've analyzed Jaws 2.
Oh, sure.
But the fact this feels to me like a more successful version of what Jaws 2 was trying to do, and with Roy Scheider.
Well, not to go completely off track, but my friend Rich and I, but we came up with this independently, and now since then we've talked about one day maybe we'll make this happen. But Jaws 2, the ways that fails is that there should not have been a shark in Jaws 2. Jaws 2 should have been completely Roy Scheider, Brody being completely gun shy after the first one and just being like, shark, and there's no shark ever, and he's just freaking out about it the whole time.
That's great.
And there really isn't one up, and you can kind of see, just use the same exact scene. We're trying to do a cut of it, but it figuring out what
that would also lead to his heart attack for Jaws: The Revenge.
Exactly. There you go.
That's amazing. All right.
That's so that's and he does his classic chewing on the end of his glasses, which I know will annoy
my other partner.
Mike's other podcasting partner, Lady Chew on the How Dare You podcast, has already pointed that out in relation to Roy Scheider as a
unacceptable.
Yeah, that was my first thought, by the way, Mike. I thought Chew's gonna hate that.
I'll let her know.
But it's clearly something that Roy Scheider likes to do in movies.
That's amazing.
And, it's his mouth, it's his ears. Go for it.
His choice. All right, we'll take another break, everyone, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up with 2010 right after this. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We're here talking, of course, about 2010, the 1984 film. All right, gents. Where do we go from here? One of the things I wanted to talk about was, like, there are some, for the 1980s, 1984, there are some great fucking effects in this movie. I mean, this movie looks good.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really expecting it to look dated when I went back to, more weirdly, just because of the way that things progress. The effects from the 80s look worse. Well, worse, quote unquote, look more dated than a lot of the things from before that. Like
That's right, yeah.
2000, everything looks dated compared to 2001 because it was filmed, in space in the future. But, I was expecting it to be more dated, expecting to see, the kind of, the green screen bleed through a little bit more, see more matte lines than I did, and I was like,
I was particularly impressed about how well integrated the bodies were when they were floating in space. I mean, that's usually the downfall of a lot of movies around this period.
Yeah.
That you just can't. It just doesn't look like it's in the same place. And I thought they pulled it off really well. The only thing I noticed was when lasers or flames were involved, it started to get a little difficult, but that was it. And I love the stop motion balloon. I mark that as a real kind of high effects point of that period in cinema. Having never seen it before, I was just bowled over. I thought, finally, it's like an inflating balloon in stop motion is just like the perfect marriage of style and content on screen. I loved it.
Yeah, I myself, some of those shots of the, getting into orbit.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of like close up, hey, fiery ball shots, the money shots for a science fiction movie. But I dig those far away shots where, you just see the flames creeping along and all the astrological bodies in the background or foreground or whatever. I thought all of that just looked amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, those again, it made me, maybe it's because I have it on the brain. It did make me think a little bit of Galileo 7 in Star Trek, where they're burning the fuel and making that kind of streak across the sky, and I was like, oh, this is... Oh, I like that.
I also
too.
like the lines, but when you have Balaban and Lithgow when they wake up. And Balaban asks, how was the arrow breaking? And he goes, well, it worked. We're here. Oh, I wish I could have seen that. Well, I wish I could have slept through it.
I really liked, speaking of other science fiction properties, I think one of the things that this movie gets the balance right on among so many things is hypersleep as a concept. I've always thought, when it turns up in, the Aliens franchise or Planet of the Apes, it's like they wake up too quickly. Like, hypersleep is effectively you put whatever the technology around it is, the science is, you're putting yourself in a coma, right? You should probably not be able to stand, and you probably shouldn't be like alert right away.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah. But in most movies, you just kind of stretch it out and you're ready for action. And I loved here that, we had a comatose Roy Scheider for a little bit and just, how awful Lithgow and Balaban look when they come out of the hypersleep. I really like that sort of detail. And I guess that goes back to, hard science fiction as well.
Well, and there's even detail in the dialogue. I love, how do you feel? And Scheider says, shaky, hungry, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
It's great.
It is. There's a lot of talk about food in this movie.
Little touches. Go ahead.
There's a lot of food and drink in this movie. Like conversations about bourbon, hot dogs, and mustards.
I greatly appreciate any conversations about hot dogs.
Yeah. Easy as pie, piece of cake.
Well, that came up in the I don't remember where I was reading it, but the kind of incorrect predictions. The hot dog thing.
Are both gone.
The Astrodome and the original Yankee Stadium are no longer. Yeah.
I mean,
So you
essentially,
can't have
I
either
guess
of
that's
those
what
hot dogs
like
anymore.
speculative science fiction is. It's like you throw enough at the wall, some of it's gonna stick, but the stuff that doesn't stick looks pretty egregious in retrospect.
Right.
I suppose, yeah. I
Yeah.
suppose like
Although
I began to feel once we were in space that we never should have left space. That's my big problem with this movie. When we go back to Earth for fairly tenuous reasons, I mean,
Right.
I suppose I don't
Come
know
on, we
what does
have,
everyone
like-
feel about the whole Dave Bowman subplot here. Maybe that's part of the problem
Okay.
for me. I don't know. What do we think about that?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of the kind of thing that works in the book, I'm sure, a lot better than it's probably a combination of it's in the book and, well,
There's a lot of
we
that.
got
Yeah.
Keir Delay here. Let's give him a little bit more to do than just kind of, showing up and rasping for one or two scenes. Yeah, it was definitely
Mm-hmm.
jarring each time that it went back because they weren't even back
But
to
they're
back.
still
I almost
fairly
would've
close together,
preferred them
too, which
being,
is a little
like,
weird.
diversion back to back. But yeah, maybe even make them further
And
apart.
I
or closer
also-
together, either one. Make it,
I was a little put off by how much product placement there was in those scenes as well, because then I just thought, well, that's obviously a big fact. That's a big factor of they got to get their Pan Am dollars and they got to get their so it's hard to do that in the depths of space.
Do you like one more than the other, either of you?
of the two scenes.
Yeah.
The two Dave visitations. The visiting his mom felt a little too kind of I don't know, like cocoon, batteries not included.
I was
something
just
like
gonna
that.
say
Yeah,
cocoon.
right.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that.
It felt a little bit too much on that end, whereas the him visiting his wife had almost like a horror movie vibe to it, like a low
That's
key.
the
just
that's
kinda-
the thing that makes me like that scene a lot, is that it
Yeah.
has that vibe, and I don't know the actor's name or whatever the wife's name is, but she was great.
you know who it is. That's the weird part. Is it's Zooey Deschanel's mom.
Yeah,
It's Mary Jo
I'm
Deschanel.
just seeing that now. Mary Jo
Wow.
Deschanel. Yeah.
Which was another thing that again, it's not like I'm rediscovering some of this stuff. I just wouldn't have, when I was a kid,
You
Zoe-
wouldn't have cared, right?
There was no Zoe Deschanel, so who
Right.
cares who her mom was? And also, like, I wouldn't have known who Candice Bergen was. So I probably may have. My parents might have, but so it's weird to go back and watch it now and being like, oh, huh, because you see it in the
Right,
She,
that's
she makes
cool.
it even to the opening credits where you're just like, Deschanel. I wonder if that's, and you look it up and there she goes.
Yeah.
Um,
And she was in The Right Stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, she was.
again playing like an astronaut's wife. That's her. I guess she got
Typecast.
typecast.
As did Roy Scheider with Stressed Out Dinner Interplay with a Child.
Right? Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
his. He has to
That's
do
his
that in every
bag.
movie.
Well, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, but overall, I don't think both were necessary. I do like that. I guess I guess maybe just cut the mom thing.
And
Although
maybe it is
that
just
is
one of
where
those-
you see the Time magazine, but still.
Right.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it may just
that,
be. Sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
No, well, I mean, I felt that the Dave Bowman, whatever form we saw him in, there was more of a desire to reenact scenes from the original movie,
Yeah.
and that was the main purpose behind them. I like the fact that it brings back some of the ambiguity of the original, because it's easy to. It's weird, when you think about 2001, I don't even think that anything happened at the end of it. It's not that I think, oh, what happened? I think, well, nothing kind of happened.
Space Hotel.
Right, right. And I'm content with that, but I think a lot of people wouldn't be. And if you look at the reviews of this online, there's a lot of people who say, "Finally, we had a movie that explained what happened," and it's like, well, that's not the way I'm looking at it.
Well,
Right.
but there's
I'm
the other
certainly glad
side.
that Dave Bowman comes in and says, "I don't know who I am. I don't know what's going on."
Well, and one of my favorite lines in this whole movie is when Hal is talking to Floyd, to Roy Scheider, and he's giving him a message that they have to leave in 2 days, and there's this whole back and forth of who's sending it, I don't know, and going back and forth, and then all of a sudden you get the line, "I was David Bowman."
Right.
Yeah.
What a great fucking line. I just love that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's another one where it plays like a little bit, again, not quite a horror scene, but like the way that it's suspenseful and
Yeah.
He can ratchet up some tension in this movie.
Yeah.
That scene and then the very last scene is edge of your seat stuff, waiting for a computer to decide.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's really.
Speaking of, the balance. It's interesting, the balance in this movie between explaining and over-explaining. How did we all feel about?
That was one of my questions too.
Hal, finding out why Hal did what he did, which again is not a question that ever entered into my mind.
Right.
Right.
That there were reasons beyond malfunction that he did what he did.
Well, and this is part of a rather kind of famous Roger.
I say he.
Yeah, right.
It's a computer, but you know what I mean.
This is kind of a part of a famous Roger Ebert review of this movie where he ended up giving it, I think, 3 out of 4 stars. He said, on its own, this movie is very good, but he loves sort of the impressionistic feel of 2001 and the, how much as an audience member you're expected to bring to it, and it's subconscious and emotional and all of that. And he sort of lamented that this movie just so bluntly gives a reason why Hal did what he did.
Right.
Hal was told to lie. He didn't know how to do that. So, he killed a bunch of people. Done, end of story.
Yeah.
But to me, it's the essential difference between that movie and this movie.
Yeah.
I think this movie had to answer that question by virtue of having this movie, right? And it's not a disappointing answer to me.
No,
it is to me. I didn't. As soon as it goes down the government conspiracy road, I thought, okay, I don't like that. I don't mind the
Why
fact
not,
that
though?
there's.
Just because we've been there before?
I
Too
just
familiar?
think it's. I just don't buy it. I don't buy the government conspiracy element, and I think that's just retconning.
I didn't take it as much of a conspiracy as just kind of bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy,
chain of
right?
command
Me
stuff,
too.
Okay. It wasn't like, oh, they're not necessarily, conspiring to keep a secret. It's just like, all right, well, let me add in the.
We're covering all our bases, but we're covering each base with something different.
Right. And Part A doesn't know what Part B is doing, not because they're necessarily keeping it secret, but because it's, different plans with different intentions. Again, if you, I can't think of what would have been better for that. If you, like you said, if you're going to make this movie at all, then that's a intriguing. That's kind of the crux of it is them getting there to find out what went wrong, essentially. And
yeah, exactly,
other
right.
than just like, all right, oh, it was a a bug. It was a malfunction. That would have been fine too, I guess. But I like that. Then that idea of that kind of cements Chandra's kind of connection with Hal, and then kind of that. I think that helps us get to that scene of him talking Hal through the decision at the end too.
Yeah, I mean it's also a very peculiar sequel trope of having the villain return in the sequel as a hero,
right?
Which is something we see again. The one that's jumping out to me is Terminator 2, but there are other examples. Fast and Furious has pulled that trick a few times.
Back and forth
well.
several times.
Back and forth several times,
right.
Just to keep it interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's what it seemed like. And there is that many people have said it over the years that they just loved Hal, despite what he was doing in the frame of the movie, which is, murder.
Right, yeah.
Plain and simple. They're like, I love this guy, he's so cool. So I wonder if there's a consciousness to sort of bring him back in a more positive light.
Right. Well, it wasn't his fault. There you go.
Yeah, it was
Right.
the government.
It's your fault,
It was
Scheider.
Which again, I'm not saying that as a negative thing, but it's just interesting that that idea comes back. Like, the more you're with a character over a certain number of films, the more likely they are to come out in a more positive light. And it's the same with long form television as well. The Deadwood taking Swearingen from the worst guy in the world to the worst guy in the world that you also like.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would rather, in terms of over-explaining things, I thought maybe you were going to talk about the voiceover, which
I have that note too.
Yeah, that was heavy. I feel like that's purely okay. People didn't get 2001, so let's make sure we explain everything
Right.
and have it. And I really don't. Acoustically, I have some problems with this movie. I don't love the score at all.
Oh, that's interesting.
But
David Shire, right?
Yeah, it
Isn't
is.
yeah, I feel like that just stumbles a couple of times, and also the way that those kind of messages home have this like reverb kind of tin can quality to them a little bit. I like that. I think the voiceover is largely unnecessary. Like for a lot of it, it's like, okay, yeah, I know why you're going there, but I get it that you're trying to undo, not make the quote unquote mistakes. You call it a mistake, I call it
right.
from the first movie.
Yeah,
But
The mistakes
also,
that aren't mistakes.
right. And you're trying to appeal to everybody, make sure everybody's on board. I get it, but just the way they were done feel extra.
Yeah, there are moments
Well,
like
and
that
also
when
it's-
it crosses over into pandering. I think
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Like, that cut to where I think it might even almost ruin your favorite moment, Mike, where it says, I was Dave Bowman, and there's a cut to like the shot of the baby, as in it's like, oh, like
That's-
he's been
Yeah.
it's like, oh, he's been reborn through the cycle. It's like, yeah, but I like that more as an image than a set like life cycle.
Well, and if you'll notice,
explanation.
that is visually the most uneven part of this movie, is that exact moment. You have a great reaction shot from Scheider seeing
Is there anything
right, seeing the star baby.
else that exists?
But of course the very next shot is it being gone without a reaction shot to that.
Right.
And so it
Just makes it seem like, oh, I get it. This is like a behind the scenes shot almost.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah, exactly.
He's just been
right.
standing here talking to nothing this whole time, waiting for the effects to be added.
Yeah.
Well, even that sequence, I don't know, it bothered me a little bit because it doesn't progress chronologically through Dave's life cycle there either. It's like, here's
No.
astronaut
Goes back
Dave.
and forth.
No, here's old man Dave. Here's astronaut Dave again. No, here's like very old man
Here's
Dave.
really old man.
Yeah. So I
Yeah, he's basically standing there saying, Kubrick didn't write me an ending, so this is
Right.
all you got.
This is what you get.
It's like, remember this part? Huh? Remember? Okay,
Right.
see you later. Like, I'm a baby now. Here I go.
Which, it's like, it's ironic that in a much more contrived, I think, mercenary way, this movie ends on a note of ambiguity, but in a way that suggests a sequel.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not actually ambiguity. It's just like, we want a sequel, so we're going to put up an image that will be explained in the next one. But I don't think that's what 2001 was going for, especially not in 1968. 68, yeah. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
we definitely want a sequel to this,
Although
in the same way that this movie was.
that just made me think about I mentioned that it beat for the Hugo. It beat out Dune, which ends with like a planet kind of being reborn and new, and Star Trek 3, which ends with a planet being reborn and
That's right.
Oh no, that was 2. I guess the end of. All right, so I was trying to tie it. I was like, wait, was this a theme? Was this something we were worried about? Is kind of
Well,
terraforming?
Spock. I would call Spock a planet at that point.
Yeah, right, exactly.
He is from that point onwards. He is both Spock and Genesis.
Right.
He's Spock Genesis,
There you go.
the famous video game console of the 90s.
Well, I mean, we're basically at the end here, boys. So let me ask you this final question. What do we think of Jupiter becoming the second sun, and the monolith is the giver of life and also the, taker of life?
If it was most other people, I would think it's kind of dumb. But I'm like, well, it's Arthur C. Clarke, and he knows more about this kind of thing than I do. So,
Right.
all right. I guess so.
That's fascinating. That's interesting.
I mean, I do have questions about, well, how does that affect us now? Where he's
I've had all kinds of those same questions, and I went on deep dives. Like, because I remember asking my 7th grade science teacher, I remember asking, why would a spaceship near Io be covered in sulfur?
Right.
And he's like, I don't know. And so he came back and he said, actually, Io has a lot of volcanoes, so that might be true. And then just on this watching, I started doing deep dives about if Jupiter became a sun, and it turns out it wouldn't affect us all that much. There'd be some orbital things where we'd be a little hotter than normal on when we get close to Jupiter, but that doesn't it's not happening all the time, and wouldn't be terrible for us. Like, we can survive with Jupiter as a sun.
Yeah, they say something about, like, oh, children now will grow up like never having known night or something like that. I'm like, whoa, don't we need that? Like,
that's the one thing I wonder about, because
that sounds like a horror film.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But what he says is they'll never know a sky without 2 suns.
Right.
But the thing that I kept wondering was, would we ever have night? I like night.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've both thought about the science of it. None of that even though, I did the same thing that Pete did. I was like, Arthur C. Clarke's got me on that one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to question that aspect of it. But it brought into focus something that I was thinking for the entire movie, in imagistically going back to Star Wars with the 2 suns. It just reminded me that because this movie is a sequel to 2001, I think it feels like it has carte blanche to rip off everything, every science fiction image from every movie since, because it has deniability. It can go, we're a sequel to 2001. Aliens took that from 2001, so we can use whatever's in. Well, not Aliens hasn't happened yet, but Alien.
Right.
There was so many moments like that where I thought that, because this predates so many of the movies that it uses imagery from, that it just has this sense of entitlement. And I think that's, there's just so much in the design of the spaceship that reminds me of the Nostromo. And so many other instances where I'm thinking of Star Wars or the Star Trek movies, and then I'm like, yeah, but it all goes back to 2001, so is it really stealing, or is it just reclaiming something? But then, on the other side of that, I think I can see the influence of this on things that happen in Aliens and Alien 3. So I think, I don't, obviously it's not a disliked movie, but it's not particularly high regarded science fiction movie. But I could definitely see where James Cameron, took some things, and it has been kind of influential in a secretive way.
Backdoor.
Right.
Backdoor influence for
Yeah.
a few science fiction movies since, unless
I think some people that made some of our other favorite movies really liked this movie.
That's the feeling I get. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, not narratively, but you can totally, as far as look and feel of this type of thing goes, you can totally see the kind of stepping stones, but from Alien to this to Aliens. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this happened in between there. Look at the, the way they have the crew gathered around the table and that kind of a thing. It's like, oh yeah. This is totally within that vibe.
So I thought, I mean, so while the science of it was and is fascinating, just the fact that it ended with the image of two suns and the kind of audacity of that, but then remembering that this is a sequel to 2001, so everything that happened in between is already stealing from 2001. So what's the difference?
Right.
Yeah.
I like that. I just I thought it was a great piece of intertextuality.
It would be neat to take that whole, and there's the, I don't know if you guys have ever taken the end of 2001, and if you put the Pink Floyd song Echoes with it, there's some synchronicities there that make it fun to do. Not saying it was intentional. There's a whole conspiracy theory that says it was intentional and all this other stuff, but it would be fun to take the kind of the denouement kind of post Jupiter part of this movie and mix it with play maybe that the staring at the French horns, Luke with the two suns,
right.
from Star Wars, as they go through this montage of everybody looking at two suns now.
Yeah,
that's delicious.
I mean, as Pete said, that with it, that it's equal parts Kubrick and Spielberg, or that this movie kind of feels that way. I thought that the whole sort of message of peace, denouement, it felt like kind of 80s Spielbergian powdered sugar put over what is in other ways quite a rugged space movie.
Right.
That, it got very sentimental very fast. I don't think that's a bad thing, and obviously, like, the emotion of the characters really helps with that transition.
Right.
Like, Bob Balaban breaking into tears, and so it's earned to a certain extent, but it wasn't necessary. I mean, and again, I'm not thinking, I'm not watching this in the mid-'80s where it would have seemed more powerful and urgent and relevant to say these things. So, but it did sort of, it put a gloss over the movie that just reminded me of, some of Spielberg's movies and how he can kind of lurch into the sentimental very quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it wasn't how I saw things wrapping up.
That's
20 minutes. I looked at the clock. It was 20 minutes to go. I was like, I don't know how we're wrapping this up. So I guess in a way this is as good a way as any, and maybe it made maybe Reagan watched it, and it wasn't just Steve Gutenberg that made him end the Cold War. It was this. I don't know, but watching it now, it's sort of like, it feels like you've sort of slapped on something to end the movie. Doesn't necessarily work with the rest of the movie, but so that's how I felt about it.
Well, it does lead you to kind of, if not crave, at least be interested in a third movie, which apparently they've talked about every once in a while.
Right.
They're like, oh yeah, one day we'll do Odyssey 3. Which the year is it?
2061.
2061. So what is that? That's,
I'm pretty sure,
50 years after 2010.
51.
So if this is, we should make that in
or 41,
2031 or something. 2030. I just lost my math. 2035. We should make 2000. I don't know.
Okay.
yeah, right.
Trying to figure out what we could do to make the.
And again, I thought it was a great sequel moment to just up the ante. We had with the multiple monoliths that it's like more monoliths than you've ever seen, and now they fly.
Right.
Right.
It's like such a sequel image.
Yeah, flying essentially out of what looks a little bit like a Death Star if you squint a little bit.
Yeah,
right.
And again, they feel like they own those images because of 2001, so it's fine. And I don't know what's going on at Lake Monolith.
They were absolutely intent on telling us why, my God, it's full of stars, or how, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, which was in the book of 2001, but not
Okay.
in the
yeah.
movie. So then to bring that back and make that the kind of central thread of this movie is interesting because it was, I would never think to second guess Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite. It's one of my favorite things, but like that to have that end without, to have the movie work the way it doesn't lead into the narrative flow the way the book might. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna want to turn this into a thing that you're gonna revisit, then throwing that little tidbit of this mystery, like, oh my god, it's full of stars, like that. What does that mean? And then it gives you this fuel to do it. But I really do appreciate the way that it was handled in the movie. But I understand then bringing it back for this gives you that kind of, the people on Earth in the movie didn't see Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite. They just lost track of Dave, and
That's
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they don't have the same weirdness that we have. So for them to get that, it kind of gives them that little mystery to solve.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, rest assured, we're probably going to run a little long this episode. Let's take one more break, and then we'll come back and we'll truly finish up, with 2010, the year we make contact. Right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by the Sounds in Cinema podcast. If you like podcasts like I do, boy, do I have a treat for you. You need to
Stay on target.
and check out the Sounds in Cinema podcast. Listen as your host, sound designer and music creator Tony Parham, and co-host, musical performer and sound lover Derek Hansen, D-Rock if you're nasty, and I am, discuss all things sound related to film, television, stage, and theatrical productions. They discuss environmental sounds, bioacoustics, dialogue, the nature of communication through sound, but as an added bonus, they drink beer and try to
Stay on target.
find them wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the pure mania of a man who can charitably be described as Doug, the dog from Up, and another man with a soothing and sultry voice trying to get that man to
Stay on target.
That's the Sounds in Cinema podcast. Tune in and listen to the sounds they are creating just for you. All
I
right.
agree.
Anything else anybody needs to get off their chest about 2010, the year we make contact?
Well, you know what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna ask for a credit check.
Of course. What was I thinking?
Pete, I like to watch credits.
Sure.
I'm talking to the host of Star Wars Minute. Why am I even doing that? It's probably where I got it from. I just a visual futurist is probably the coolest credit that any artist could receive. In
My old job.
Who's credited as visual futurist in this?
Oh, I can't remember now. I should have written that down. But I love that term.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I've never seen a movie that gives special thanks in the credits to a very large array of telescopes.
Right.
They get their own thank you. And God bless those telescopes.
Oh, it's Sid Mead. I was going to say, what is it like? It's totally Sid Mead. That's the type of thing that
Yeah.
he did. Perfect. Sid Mead, visual futurist. I would love. I've been spending, I guess, the last, let's say, 40 years trying to figure out how I can have dolphins in my home.
I know, right?
Dolphins! We totally missed out the dolphins.
And it turns out it's not really a thing that we're going to have, and that's fine. I've come to understand that it's not,
That it's not cool.
really fair to them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do like. It does seem like they're not necessarily. The way that it's almost like the. Sorry to keep going back to Star Trek, but the Cetacean Institute, where it's like, all right, there's the ocean, and then there's like a little enclosure where they can come up to it, and it seems like maybe the dolphins here are somewhat free range. That they just have a thing that they can come up into the house to get fed, and they know that they'll get fed regularly. It's almost like putting out a bird feeder.
Yeah.
They just have a little pool that because you can hear the ocean sounds from their house. So I'm assuming that it's not a containment unit. It's just like a bird feeder essentially. So that's my new goal.
An elaborate set of
vision
tunnels
board.
that lead to the ocean.
Yeah, it's like, a house just kind of, one of those little house on stilts that leads out over the ocean, but there's also a little, portal that you can go through.
Well, because my before I'd seen this movie, all I knew about it was I think it was on With Gawley and Rust, both Matt Gawley and Paul Rust talking about the thing they remember about 2010 is the pet dolphins, is that you can have dolphins in your home.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was prepared for it to be like, a sort of in-room aquarium was what I was imagining. So I was pleasantly surprised when even the fictional version of this had taken into account that they need to retain some link to the wild.
Yeah.
I suppose probably the voyage home is also what I'm thinking about.
Right.
And in Next Generation, aren't there dolphins on the Enterprise, or is it whales?
Whales.
Yeah.
No, I mean
Whales
in Next Generation, don't they mention that they have dolphins on board?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't remember.
There's some kind of sea life, I think. We never see them, but obviously budget. But I think Geordie a few times says to people coming on the ship, "Have you seen the dolphins?"
Oh yeah, look at
I
that.
don't remember that.
That's apparently there were dolphins aboard the Enterprise D.
Yeah.
Yeah, Geordie LaForge showed some of them to Par Lenore.
Yeah, and apparently someone showed this movie to
Yeah,
because of the Next
absolutely.
Generation. So yeah, but it's like it's interesting that moment is so central to this movie when it's not really central to this movie at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's things that people take away from it. Is
One
the
thing
idea
I
of-
feel also that we haven't touched on that I'll just put out there, John Lithgow, American Treasure.
Yeah.
That guy's fucking great. Love him.
Yeah.
such a great character for him too.
Oh yeah.
The most recent the most recent thing that I encountered him in was I was listening. Well, I have been. I'm not done yet, but I've been listening with my kids to the Star Wars radio dramas, and in the Empire Strikes Back radio drama, John Lithgow plays Yoda. So
Nice.
you're up
Wow.
for a treat if you haven't heard those ever, because it's admirable what he's trying to do. It's a little bit like 2010 itself, in that it's like he's got one foot in kind of slavish reproduction, verisimilitude, but it also goes off a little bit every once in a while, and then you're like, he sounds more like kind of old Jewish Grover half the time, but
Oh, Jewish Grover.
Amazing.
That's the thing. If you're doing Yoda and you're not Frank Oz, you will eventually sound like an old Jewish Grover.
yeah,
Right.
it's tough. But he does some interesting things. So worth checking out.
Lovely.
Yeah, I think he's magnificent in this movie. Also, I would speak up for, and this is a character that I was sure was gonna die, although I'm not actually sure if he did die, but he disappeared. Max,
Yeah,
the cosmonaut.
Oh, what's his name?
What a lovable,
Elia Baskin is just the utilitarian Russian man.
too good for. I was gonna say too good for this world, but too good for this part of space.
Yeah.
I knew he was gonna get lost or something was gonna happen.
yeah. Once you have people be friends, then you're like, uh oh.
Then you're doomed.
Yeah.
You're so doomed.
Yeah.
He's like a red shirt, but with personality.
Right. Well, Pete, we can't thank you enough for joining us. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for letting me pick this movie, because I'm happy that I got to revisit it.
Oh, yeah. I was so happy you picked this movie, and I'm still a fan.
Yeah.
Love this movie. Can you
And
tell
anything
our...
we can plug for you?
Yeah, anything you're working on that you'd like everybody to find?
Well, mainly it's StarWarsMinute.com and ABCDTOS, which is my alphabetical voyage, if you will, through Star Trek, the original
Right.
series, with some friends of mine. Those are both kind of slightly obsessive podcasts that I do, and every once in a while other projects pop up. PeteTheRetailer.com I have, and I mainly just use it as a place to link to those two pages and whatever other things come up. But
I would also speak up for a completed run of Alphabetical, which I listened to all of very recently. Alphabetical cataloging of the Beatles discography, and it's just superb.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's my. I'm not gonna say less popular because the people who like it definitely like it, but the movies by minutes kind of format took off. We have moviesbyminutes.com. There's all I think close to 200 different shows right now doing all kinds of different movies that some of which you've never heard of, some of which you've heard of a lot. But the going alphabetically through a band's catalog is didn't quite catch on as much, but I love that it's also a thing that people have been doing, and it's a fun thing to do, and it's a fun thing to see. But yeah, so far I've done the Beatles and Devo for that, and
That's amazing.
I'm not
Yeah,
enough
I
of
love
a
that.
Devo fan to do ABC Devo, so I'll have to learn about Devo first. But these podcasts would make me want to do that for sure.
Yeah, few people are, but it does. Interesting to see that people kind of going into it for the first time. We've had people kind of watching along with us for Star Trek, going there like, all right, I'm not that familiar. They might have been TNG fans or they know the movies, but they've never really watched much of the original series. So now they're going through with us, which is kind of a cloudy way to do it because you're like, all right, well, you're not getting the way why this is important yet, but but it is it's fun to do that with them and to have kind of a tour guide with you. So hopefully,
yeah, and just especially with 60s television, to decode it in the way that ABCDTOS does, I think is, I used to teach film history and TV history, and it's not just a tour guide. It's like a translator in the past, in past media, and it will make a lot of people's enjoyment of those shows much more enjoyable.
I hope so.
Well, what else have you got going on, Tom? Plug away.
Oh yeah, I just started a new video podcast, I guess you call it, video YouTube series, the James Bond Book Club. And Michael, you were the first guest on that.
Was I ever?
Yeah, we discussed the James Bond books over cocktails once a month.
Enough to get drunk on, I'll tell you.
Yeah, we did Casino Royale. Next up is it might be out by the time this is out, The Spy Who Loved Me.
Okay.
And we'll go around the houses with regards to James Bond books. Not just the Fleming canon. We'll do continuation, spin-offs, books about everything.
I tried to read those just this past summer, not too long ago. I was like, I started Casino Royale. This is great. I like this one. I get it. It's fun. And then just dove into. I bought a bunch of them. And I was like, I'm gonna dive right in. These are fun reads, and I made it at chapter 5 of Live and Let Die. Stopped me just because I'm like, okay, there's a little bit too much racism here. I need to take a breather.
Right.
There's it's that there are some texts in Western civilization that racism is almost stuck to them in a way that it's completely inextricable. I mean, Live and Let Die is up there with Birth of a Nation.
Yeah.
So it was partly informed my decision not to go chronologically and to to sort of go thematically or just sort of randomly ping a book here, whatever came to mind. A big part of that was not having to do Live and Let Die second, to sort of save that until you've built up some goodwill.
Yeah.
Well done.
What about you, Mike? Any new projects on the horizon?
I would just say, please listen to the How Dare You podcast, where me and Lady Chu battle a deliciously bad movie every week. And of course, because she's the movie novice, every 5 movies or so, it becomes how dare she not have seen this movie, and I watch her watch a good movie.
She has some fascinating thoughts about The Sting.
Yeah.
Particularly that she thought she written the Scott Joplin theme tune on her own.
No. Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, I applaud the audacity of sort of saying, didn't I make that up with you when we're off mic?
Nope.
No, that's the theme tune of the movie.
Yeah, it was that, and don't stir coffee cups with your fork and lick them. Choose hot takes.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, that's it for 2010, the year we make contact, a movie we're all recommending, I assume. People should see this movie, should they not?
I think so, yeah. If you're
Yeah.
interested, if you're at all interested in it, then yes.
Just to see that, and if you're just interested in film history, you've got that Diamond Jubilee opening that they haven't retfitted.
Oh, yeah.
The MGM lion
Right.
surrounded in diamonds. Got to
Classic.
do it for that.
Classic.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, for Pete the Retailer and Tom Stewart, I am Michael Shantz. We'll be coming at you next time with another movie. At some point, Tom, you and I will have to do all the other 1984 single sequels, but that'll be
I
for
think
another
so, yeah.
time.
Yeah.
There's some doozies. It's quite a year. But that's for another time, everyone. Stay tuned and take care. We'll be coming at you with another sequel next week. So long.